everyone. Have you ever noticed how language is used to build identities? In today's lecture, I'll discuss language and identity, how words shape who we are. This lecture is relevant to the field of sociolinguistics. So let's learn and discuss in detail. Introduction. Why this matter? Have you ever changed the way you speak depending on who you're talking to, your teacher, your friends, and your parents? You may have observed that sometime when you talk to your teacher, so you speak differently. And when you talk to your parents, so you start speaking differently. While other times when you talk to your friends, so you speak differently. Why this happens? Because it depends on your identity, that who we are. If I am a student and you are my teacher, so the way I speak will be different. If you are my student and I am your teacher. Similarly, that when I come in front of my parents, so I'll start speaking differently. And if I speak with my friend, so absolutely I'll start speaking differently. It depends that who we are. This is our identity. Whether we are friends, teacher, student, boss and subordinate, right? Husband, wife, who we are depend on the person we are speaking. Now, this is not just a habit, it's a window into how language reflects our identity, who we are. As I told, that I am sitting in a meeting, and if I am chairing a meeting, so the way I speak will be different than the way my subordinates are sitting. And if I am a subordinate and someone else is chairing a meeting, suddenly the way I speak will be different. So it depends on that who we are. Our identity, so we use language depends on our identity. So today we will explore how language is more than just a tool of communication. It's a mirror of our culture, class, excuse me, gender, and regions, and a stage for expressing who we are. So, language is not only a tool of communication, but it's a mirror of our culture, which culture I belong to. It's a mirror of my class, which class I belong to. It's a mirror of my gender, whether I'm male or female. And it's a mirror of a region, that which region I live in, right? And it's a stage for expressing who we are. And it tells us that language, it tells me. When you start communicating someone and you listen, you will observe that which regions he belongs to, which class he belongs to, which culture he belongs to. Okay? What is his class? What is his gender role? So it's a language which tells us that who we are. Now, what is sociolinguistics? Definition: the study of how language interacts with society, including culture, identity, power, and a social group. So, if we define sociolinguistics is a study of how language interacts with society, relationship between language and society, including culture, language and culture, including identity, language and identity, including language and power, as well as social groups, okay, which groups someone belongs to. So, key idea: language is not neutral, it carries social meaning. Again and again, in my previous lecture, I also mentioned that language is not an empty box. It carries ideologies, it carries identities, and it carries social meaning, right? So, sociolinguistics ask, Why do we speak differently in different setting? If I am in a classroom, I'll speak differently. If I am in cafeteria, I'll start speaking differently. If I'm in conference room, I'll speak differently. If I'm with my friends, I'll speak differently. If I'm in front of my wife, I'll speak differently. If I'm in front of my children, I'll speak differently. Right? So it depends, okay, that where we are. So why sociolinguists ask question that why do we speak differently in different setting or different contexts? And how does society influences our language and vice versa? So how does society influence our language and how language influences society? It's a two-way traffic, not one-way traffic. Language and culture. Language is a cultural map. It encodes tradition, values, and worldview. Right? So, as on previous slide we mentioned that language is not an empty box. Right? So, language is also cultural map. We can see the whole culture in a language. When a person speaks, we know his tradition, their values, their norms, and the way they speak, the way they interact, the way they meet people, right? How they live. So entire culture is studied by using language. It encodes traditions. We know traditions a person when he or she speaks. We know values. What are the values of particular society? And we know worldview. How they view the world, this society. So, for example, we have example that in youth languages have multiple words for snow. So if you have multiple words for snow, so you will use, and if you have one or two words for snow, so you will use one. So what will happen? Urdu and Hindi are greetings like aap kaise hain in Urdu or in Hindi. So carry respect through pronouns. Aap kaise hain. But in English we don't have the word aap kaise hain. We say how are you? Right? So when we say that language carries culture, it shows our culture that when we meet our teachers, elders, and someone that is respectable, so we say aap kaise hain rather than how are you, right? English slang, English slang evolves quickly. Like for example, we say let, wipe, and check. So these are slang words. So activity asks student to share a word, phrase from their local languages that cannot be perfectly translated into English. So how can you translate up into English? Of course you will say you. What about tum? Then you will say again you. Right? So we don't have specific translation from Urdu to English. So ask your student and do this practice. Let me zoom it. Language and social class. Accent and vocabulary often signal class. Right? The way, if you belong to lower class, your accent will be different. If you belong to upper class, your accent will be different. That's why that in England, okay, that upper class aristocratic people, all the time they speak in Queen accent or BBC accent or standard English, London English. While those who belong to lower class, they will have different accent, middle England accent, or other accent they are going to, a Scottish one, right, southern one. So they will speak then in different accent. Similarly, that if you belong to upper class, right? In Pakistan. So your accent or speaking Urdu will be different if you belong to lower class, right? Or middle class. So accent and vocabulary signal class. You might have noticed that when your students they come to university or college and they belong to lower class or middle class. So their vocabulary will signal it that who they are, or their accent will signal that which class they belong to. So your class, when we say your class, is also identity, because you belong to upper class, working class, lower class, educational class, literal class, non-literal class, right? For example, there in British English, receive pronunciation is linked with upper class. Receive pronunciation, BBC English, okay, in terms of vocabulary, or Queen English, that is a link with upper class. Now, Bassel's Burness theory elaborated code grammatically complex explicit. So when we look at, okay, so upper class, they will use, their language will be a grammatically complex one, right? Explicit. And they will use restricted code, relies on shared context, right? So what is restricted codes, right? The other people don't understand. What are you referring to? And grammatically complex one, because grammatically complex vocabulary or accent, this is not the job of lower class people, right? Now, classroom scenario, compare, like, could you please lend me your pen for a moment versus pen dona. So could you please lend me your pen for a moment? This is a complex structure. And these structures can be used the person who belongs to lower class, if that is a native speaker. Pendona. In Urdu, they will say pendona. Language and gender. Another slide. Research shows that men and women often use language differently. This also who we are. Our identity is expressed by using language. For example, that women use more politeness, markers, and take question. Why they use take question? Because all the time they have been left suppressed. So they are not sure whatever they are saying, whether they are true or not, right? They depend on the male. So they use polite markers. Could you please lend me your pen? If you don't mind, can I talk you for a while? Such kind of polite, all the time they'll be polite. Polite markers will be there. And take questions will be there, right? That, for example, that are you hungry? Aren't you? Okay, so man interrupts more frequently compared to women. Why men interrupt? Because they are dominant in most of society. That's why they interrupt. So modern perspective, the gender language is evolving. Pronouns like they, them express non-binary identities. So in modern English, we don't see like she or he. We see they. Even for singular person, we use they, them, and their, or not like his or her, or he or she. We say they and them, right? Instead of his or her, we say there. Language and region. Dialect and accent tell us where someone is from, right? Which regions you belong to. You belong to Banu, you belong to Karak, you belong to Kohat, belong to Peshawar, belong to Charsadda, belong to Nowshera, belong to Swabi, belong to any part of Punjab, right? So it is the accent which tells where you are. Because your coat, your dress, it does not tell you where you belong to. For example, if I belong to somewhere like a southern part of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, from Karak, from Kohart, from Banu. If I wear like dress code, right? Pant shirts, or if I wear any type of cloth, so it will not like identify me, which regions I belong to, who am I. By the time I start speaking, so from my accent, people will recognize that which regions I belong to, right? Your accent, this is your identity. So English has regional varieties. We know different varieties, and now we have American English, British English, Pakistani English. Even within British, we have different varieties. But if we talk about world Englishes, so we have different varieties of English now. So we have like Yorkshire and Southern Americans, Lahori versus Karachi slangs. So regional accent can be stigmatized or celebrated. So many activity you can give to your students, like play example of regional phrases. Let students guess where they are from. Identity in action, code and switching. Definition: shifting between languages, dialect or style based on context. This is called what? Identity in action. For example, that at university, excuse me professors, may I ask you a question? With friends, oi sun zara. Because when you're a friend, or listen to me, we say in English. But with professor, you will say that professor, may I ask a question? It's a context, a different setting. So you switch from one like a variety to another, from one style to another one. Why people quote switching? To fit in, right, in a particular context, situation, to signal belonging, okay, that where they belong, to hide or reveal identity. What are their identities? Fun exercise asks students to share a time when they switch language and mid conversation. When they were talking someone and in mid conversation they switch from one language to another. So why did they switch? They might hide or reveal identity, that who they are. Or they might signal belonging. Oh, I belong to your regions. Or to fit yourself in a particular context where people are. Diglossia definition: when two varieties of language are used in society for different purposes. Two varieties of language for different purposes. For example, Arab countries, classical Arabic versus colloquial Arabic. So for two purposes, at home and outside home. Now Pakistan English, official versus Urdu and regional languages. So Pakistani English, official versus Urdu and regional language, that is at home. So they switch from one language to another or one variety to another one. Highlights how identities shift based on setting. How many slides are left? Okay, a few are left. It is done. How identity shapes language choices. Language is a badge of identity. We choose words to signal. Group membership like youth, slang or dialect. Values, politeness. Now rebellions, breaking grammar rules. This is what we're talking about, how identities shape language choices. Case study: F in the US stigmatized formally but celebrated music media. To wrap up, why this matters. Language is not just communication, it is a tool of power, a marker of belonging, already we discussed, and a way of negotiate identity, who we are. Encourage students to notice that how they speak differently in class versus with friends, how language choices include or exclude, and how respecting linguistic diversity can reduce prejudice. Thank you so much. It was all about language and identity and how language is used or how language define who we are. Please do provide your valuable comment and insight about today's lecture. Once again, thank you so much.